security policies. So far in these videos, we've talked about the various components that make up your CheckPoint NGX R65 infrastructure, and we've installed our first gateway and the Smart Center server. So the next step is to set up our security policies. You see, thus far, sure, we've got a gateway, which is our firewall, and we have a Smart Center server, which is where we are right now, and this is where we can create all the rules and so forth that we use to configure our gateways. But right now, our gateways don't have any rules assigned to them. This means at present, they aren't really doing anything. Well, actually, that's not entirely true. Our gateway at this point is doing something. It's blocking all traffic, since the default behavior of our gateways is to not let anything through at all. Not at least until we create a security policy to allow things through. You see, if we go and open up Internet Explorer, and we'll go and try and navigate to, say, winstructor.com, we could wait as long as we like. You can see this isn't going anywhere because the gateway is actively refusing to let this through. Now, you should be aware of this behavior, and it is by design, of course, because you don't want to build your firewall and have it completely open until you start closing off ports. You want it to be closed until you open them. That way, you can remain secure. Now, the problem, of course, is that people inside your network, they won't be able to get out to the outside world unless you first start creating some rules to allow them out. But before we go off and start configuring security policies, we'll first need to configure the network objects inside CheckPoint so that it has some knowledge of the physical machines and address ranges that make up our organization. So the first thing we'll need to do is to tell the Smart Center server where our CheckPoint gateways are. So in this objects tree here on the left-hand side of our Smart Dashboard console, we're going to right-click on Network Objects, and we'll select New, CheckPoint, VPN 1 Power UTM Gateway, and this will bring up a new window here where we can launch a simple mode wizard or use the classic mode to set this up, and I'm going to select the classic mode and click on OK. Now up here in the name field, we'll need to enter in the host name of our gateway, which is CP Gate-LA, and the IP address of 10.0.0.70. And we can also enter in any comments if we like. I'm just going to say that this one is the LA gateway. Now we'll click on the communication button here, and we'll need to enter in the secure internal communications, or the SIC password, that we set up when we configured our gateway a couple of videos ago. So hopefully you remember what you set it to. So I'm going to enter that in here, and I'll type it in again to confirm it. And then we'll click on the initialize button. And if you've got everything right, you'll see that we now have established a trust between this Smart Center server and our gateway. So everything's good there. We'll click close. Now the next step is to verify that these drop-down boxes here contain the correct information for the gateway that you're setting up. Now in my case, this is NGX R65 gateway running the Secure Platform Pro OS of the type VPN 1 Power. Now finally, we'll need to check the boxes next to which products are installed on the gateway. So for me, that's the firewall component, and if we scroll down, Smart View Monitor. Alright, now that we've selected these two boxes, in the left in this menu section here, you'll notice that this has now been populated with two new items for our firewall and the Smart View Monitor. So if we select Smart View Monitor, for example, over here on the right hand side, you can see we've got options here to monitor our gateway by using system counters, which is already turned on, connections to our firewall, and traffic throughput. So we'll leave those items turned on, and next we'll go and click on the topology option. And over here on the right, we'll need to define the interfaces that we have on this gateway. So I'm going to click on the Get button and then choose Interfaces with Topology. And you can see here that it's found our three interfaces, ETH 0, 1 and 2, and the IP addresses and so forth are all correct. So we'll click Accept, and then we'll click OK. Now on the left in our object browser, if we expand CheckPoint, you can see now that we have two items here configured, the gateway that we just configured and our Smart Center server. And of course, you're going to need to follow this exact same process for any additional gateways that you have and then add them to your Smart Center server. Now, rather than creating any additional objects at this time, we're going to move on and we're going to configure some rules so we can fix this immediate problem that we've got here of no internet access and give our users access to things outside our network. So we're going to click on the File menu and choose Save, just to ensure that our changes are retained within CheckPoint, and then we'll click on File again and we'll choose New, and this will open up the new policy package window where we'll need to give our new policy package a name. So I'm going to call this one Winstructor. And in the section below, we're going to select security and address translation. I'm not going to worry about these other two for now, as we'll likely talk about these things later on. For now, we'll click on OK. And we can see here up in the top of our title bar, we can see that Winstructor is listed there. So that just gives you a quick heads up as to what policy we're working with here. All right, well, in the middle here, you can see that our policy is blank. So we'll need to define some sort of rules. So in the menu bar, we'll select Rules, and then we'll choose the first option to add a rule. And you'll note that we can add rules to the bottom of our list, to the top of the list, or below or above the current rule. Now, either way, at this point, any of these selections here, although I only can select the top two, are going to all do the same thing for me since I don't have any rules defined yet. But this will become really important later on once you have at least one rule in your rule base, since the ordering of rules will greatly affect the operation of your gateways. But more to come on that later on. So we'll select either bottom or top, it really doesn't matter right now, and this will simply place a new rule in our list here, which by default does default to being a drop rule, and you can see this big red stop sign style icon here. Right, well, let's quickly run through what these columns here do in our rule, since it's really important that you understand what they do. All right, in the leftmost column, we've firstly got the number of the rule, and like I said a moment ago, this becomes important when you have more than one rule, as the ordering will affect whether your gateway is working as you intend it to work. Now in the name column, we can specify a name for this rule, something descriptive ideally, which we can use to identify what this rule does. In the source column, this defines where the connection is coming from, whether it's an internal connection going out to the internet or it's an incoming connection. Now similarly, the destination column identifies where the data is going, whether that be internal to a host within our own network or out to the internet. In the VPN column, we can define what sort of traffic we're dealing with, for example, if the traffic is encrypted or not. In our service column, this is where we can define the type of traffic, such as FTP or HTTP and so forth. The action column is where we decide what action we want to take when we encounter traffic that meets all these conditions. Now we could drop it, like you see this rule does default to, or we can allow the traffic through or require things like authentication. And finally, in the track field, we could choose if we want to log this traffic by writing it to our gateway's log file, or we could send an alert or an email or an SNMP trap and so forth. Now if we scroll a little bit further across here, we can see the default is to install this rule on all policy targets, which means all of our gateways, but we could change that. Maybe this is a specific rule for only one gateway. Now we could choose to deploy it to only the gateways that we want. Now we can specify what time of day this rule is active, and that's useful for controlling certain activities. For example, you might allow people to watch streaming video from YouTube, but only after 5 PM. So you could create a rule that allows this to happen at a certain time, although I will admit in most cases you're probably going to leave the defaults to any, like you see here. And finally, our last column is where we can enter in any comments for this rule as well if we like. Alright, well, let's go and configure this rule, which I might add is already complete actually, except for the name of it, as the rule we're going to configure is going to be a drop all traffic rule that's designed to block and throw away any traffic that we haven't explicitly defined in our rule base. So I'm going to right click here in the name column and choose edit. And I'm going to give this a name of cleanup rule, but you can certainly call your rules whatever you like, but since CheckPoint themselves like to refer to this sort of rule as a cleanup rule, I will too, and we'll click on OK. And that's pretty much it really. We're going to leave the source and destination fields here at any, so any traffic, regardless of whether it's coming into or going out of our network, will match this rule. Now with any traffic being matched using any protocol, the action is going to be to drop the traffic, and although we don't have to log it anywhere, I'm going to turn logging on, but we're certainly going to talk more about logging later on. So this means that this rule here is going to prevent anything from going out of our network and anything coming in. So you can't get much more secure than that. It's really secure at this point since all traffic going in either direction will be blocked. But it's not very functional though, but we'll fix this up in a moment. Now the next rule we're going to create here is a rule for our gateway itself. Now since this is our firewall, we don't want people actively trying to connect to it. So we're going to put a rule in place to prevent people from accessing the firewall. So for our second rule, we can either come up to the rules menu here again and select a new rule, or we could right click on our existing rule and then choose add rule from here. Now since we have a rule already, the choice whether to place this rule above or below our existing rule now has some meaning. If we were to create a rule to allow something through our firewall for argument's sake, and we place it underneath our cleanup rule, then we still won't have traffic coming through our firewall, since rules are processed in order from top to bottom. So rule number 1 here will be evaluated, then rule number 2, then rule number 3 and 4, and so forth until a match is found. So our cleanup rule here is designed to match everything. If we place it first in the list, then nothing will ever get into or out of the firewall at all. So we'll need to add our new rule above our cleanup rule, so that way the cleanup rule is always evaluated last. So we're going to click above. Now in the new rule here, we're going to right click for its name and choose edit. I'm going to give this one a name of stealth, since again that's what CheckPoint like to refer to this type of rule as, a stealth rule, but you can call it again whatever you like. I'll click on OK. Now for the source of this rule here, we're going to leave this set to any, since we don't know where the traffic's coming from. We just don't want people connecting directly to our firewall. However, in the destination field, we'll need to change this from the default here of any to our firewall object. So we'll right click here in the destination column and we'll choose add, and then we'll need to select our gateway, which is CP Gate LA, and we'll click OK. And by the way, if you do have more than one gateway in here, you can add in additional objects into this list, by the way, so you could add them all in here and then click OK. And the final thing we're going to want to do here for this rule is to log the traffic that we're dropping. We don't need to configure any traffic types or anything like that, since we want to drop all connections coming into our firewall. So in the track column here, I'm going to right click and just choose log. Now the next rule we're going to add is one so that our local users in our network here can access the internet. And for that, we're going to need to allow outgoing HTTP. Now this will involve us having to create a new network object that represents the network that our local users are connected to. So for me, it's going to be this 10.0.0 subnet here. Now in order to create this network object, we can create it directly from within a rule, or we can come over here to the object browser menu and then right click on networks and choose new network. Now for the name here, I'm going to call this one our LA network. And we'll give it a network address of 10.0.0.0 and a net mask of 255.0.0.0. Now I'm going to leave the comment field here blank for now, but I will change the color of this network just for kicks. Let's just set it to say a dark blue color, and then we'll click OK. Alright, now we're going to right click on our stealth rule, and we'll choose Add Rule, and this rule will be below our stealth rule. And now I'm going to right click in the name column and choose Edit. I'm going to give this one a name of Outgoing HTTP, and we'll click OK. Now for the source, we'll need to set this to our LA network we just created a moment ago. And remember, you can add in any other networks you've created as well, so you'll only need to create this one single rule. So we're going to right click on our source column and choose Add, and then we'll scroll down and locate our LA network object that we just created a moment ago. And do take note here, you can click the New button and create new objects if you need to from within this window. Alright, we'll select our LA network and click OK. I'm going to leave the destination here at any, since we want our internal clients to be able to access any possible web server using HTTP. So we're going to leave our traffic here at any. Now for the service, we don't want to leave that at any, since that's going to allow our users to use any protocol, including things like FTP and file sharing and so forth. We want to restrict this rule to HTTP only. So we're going to right click on the service column and we'll choose Add. And then we'll simply type in HTTP, or alternatively you can simply scroll down to find it, and we'll click OK. And in the actions column, we're going to change this from drop, which is the default, to accept, so we'll allow HTTP. And in the track column, we'll choose to log this traffic. Now don't forget, if you have more than one subnet and you have multiple gateways, you'll want to create additional network objects as well for your other networks and allow those to have outbound access as well. Now, for the final rule that we're going to create in this video is a rule to prevent us from logging all of the net BIOS, the boot P, and RIP traffic that tends to float around on the internet. We don't want it, so we're going to drop it all at the gateway. So we're going to right click. In fact, we'll right click on our stealth rule, we'll choose to add a rule, and this one will be above our stealth rule since we'll want all of this traffic to be dropped immediately. We'll right click in the name column and choose Edit. I'm just going to call this one Net BIOS and click OK. For the source and destination addresses, we're going to leave these at any since we want all of this traffic dropped. We'll also leave our VPN column at any traffic here. But for the service, we don't want to leave that at any. We'll need to specify the protocol. So we're going to right click on the service column and choose Add. Then we'll type in NBT and we'll click OK. We'll right click again and choose Add. And we'll type in boot P and we'll select that and choose OK. And you can see our second protocol's been added here. We'll right click one more time and choose Add. And we'll type in RIP and select OK. Now, in the actions column, we're going to leave this at drop since we don't want this traffic. And finally, in the track column, I'm going to leave the default here since I really don't want to log this traffic at all. I just want it dropped. Alright, well, we've created a few rules here now, and we will be creating quite a few more as we progress through these videos. But for now, we're going to want to apply these rules and send this policy out to our gateway. Since right now, all we have is a bunch of rules to find. Our gateway is only going to start enforcing these rules once we install this security policy on our gateways. So first, I'm going to click on the save icon here to save these rules. Then, as an optional step, we can first verify that our policy is okay before we install it. And we can do that by clicking on the verify policy icon. Alternatively, we can come up to the policy menu and choose verify. Now, as you can see, it's only going to verify our security and address translation policies since that's all we have right now. So we'll click OK. And then our policy will be validated and it's going to report back any errors. All right, well, it's done. It's very quick. The verification was good. So we'll click OK. And now we can install our policy. And we can do that by clicking on the policy menu again and choosing Install. Or we can come over here to the right and click on the Install Policy icon here. Since this is our first time installing a policy, we are going to get a message here telling us that both our explicitly and implicitly defined rules will be part of the new security policy. And to view the implicit rules, we can go to View Implied Rules. So what this message is telling us is that both the rules we've just created, which are our explicitly defined ones, and the inbuilt rules, they're all going to be installed. So let's just cancel this real quick. And we'll click on the View menu. And right down the bottom, we'll choose Implied Rules. And you'll see here, in fact, I'll just move this screen so we can see a little bit greater window here. You'll now see that we've got a whole lot of rules that are actually being applied to our gateways by default. These are rules that I didn't create. They're there by default within CheckPoint. Now, I'm not going to go through all of these. In fact, you can see the ones that I did create down here that are listed in grey, and all these ones in green, they were automatically created by CheckPoint. So, look, we're not going to go through these. You can do that in your own time if you're at all interested in taking a look, but you're going to find that there's a lot of management rules here, things for reporting and logging and so forth. So right now I'm going to click the View menu. I'm going to turn off these implied rules, so it's just going to hide them from our interface here. And we'll go and click on our Install Policy icon again. I'm going to choose not to see this message anymore. Now we know what it is, and we'll click OK. Now, when we choose to install the policy on our gateways, the default behavior is to install the policy on each gateway that we've selected up the top here in this window. Now, since I only have one gateway at this time, we can see that the only selection for me is my LA gateway. But if I had more than one, then we'd see all of them listed here. So the default is to install on each gateway, but you'll notice in this grayed out section here that if we were installing to a cluster, we have the option of not installing the policy on all of the members if it fails. Now we can also choose to install on all gateways, but if we experience any failures, to not continue attempting to install the same policy on any other gateways that we may have that are running the same version of the gateway software. And down the bottom, we can also create a new database version, which we can do independently, by the way, outside of this policy installation window. And personally, I do like to create new database versions since they are very small and they take up hardly any disk space at all, but they do give you the ability to revert back to an earlier database version if you need to, and that's a nice safety feature. So I'm going to check this box here, and we can enter in a name for this database or just accept the default name and comments here. I'll leave them as they are, and we'll click OK. And we can see it's now creating a new version of our database, and it's pretty quick. It's done. It's created successfully. We'll click OK, and then our policy will be verified, and if it's okay, it'll be installed on our gateway. Now this will take a few moments, so I am going to pause the video here and we'll come back once it's done. Alright, well, our policy has been installed, and you can see here from this big green tick it was successful, so we'll click Close. Now at this point, with our third rule, people inside our network are able to browse to the internet. Our firewall's also locked from being directly accessed, and we're dropping a lot of unnecessary traffic. But you'll find there's plenty of other things that you're going to need to configure. For example, you probably have a DMZ with a web server or an FTP server in there for public access. You'll need to set rules up for that. Other services like email and DNS and so forth, they're going to need rules configured as well. Even pings, yeah. Currently, because we haven't specified any rules, pings, outbound and inbound, are going to be blocked as well. Now you might choose to drop incoming pings, and that's fine, but you might want to allow outbound pings. So let's quickly go and set it up. In fact, let's just click on Start, And we'll open up a command prompt here. And we'll try and ping, let's say, Dell's web server. And you can see here that it's failing since pings aren't matching any of our rules except our last rule here, which tells our gateway to drop everything. So rather than creating a new rule, let's just edit our existing HTTP rule here just to make things easier on ourselves. We'll right click here on the service column and we'll choose add. And your first thought here might be to look for ICMP and add that in here. And that might be the correct choice for you. But don't forget, ICMP isn't responsible for just pings. It also covers other services like traceroute as well, and you may not want to allow all of those things through. So instead, we're going to look for echo, and we'll scroll down a little bit and we'll choose an echo request, and we'll click OK. And for those of you that are familiar with pinging, you'll know that an echo request uses the type 8 field. If we double click on echo request, you'll see it set to type 8. So we'll click OK, and we're going to save this policy by clicking on the save icon, and then we're going to apply the policy. So we'll click install. This time I won't create a database version, I'll just click OK. And again, I'm going to pause the video here for the moment, and we'll come back once this policy has been installed on our gateway. Well, our installation did complete successfully, our policy's been applied, but you might be surprised to see that this won't work. So let's go and open up a command prompt. In fact, we actually had one open, but that's okay. Let's try and ping www.hp.com. And nope, it's not working. Well, the truth is, let me just cancel this here, it's not going to work now, and it won't work ever, unless of course we're pinging just an IP address, since the problem isn't with our echo requests at all. They're allowed outbound. The problem is now DNS. Now, when we try to ping a host by its name and not its IP address, that of course requires DNS, and we're not allowing DNS through. So let's just close this, and we'll close this as well, and we'll go back here to our policy. We'll right click here in our service column and we'll choose add. Now we'll type in domain, and we'll scroll down one click here and we'll select domain UDP, not TCP, which is predominantly used for zone transfers. We'll want UDP. We'll click OK, and now we'll save the policy and now install this policy on our server, and then we'll click OK. And again, this will take a few moments, so I'm going to pause the video here and we'll be back shortly. Okay, the installation of our new policy has been applied successfully, so let's go and open up a command prompt again, and let's try and ping Winstructor. Alright, well this time we've got liftoff, it's working, we're getting our replies. So, as you've seen, sometimes it's not just as simple as throwing a rule together and hoping it works. You really do need to think about what other services are being used and then plan out your rules. So in this video, we've talked about creating a security policy and deploying it to your gateways. Now, without this policy, your gateways aren't doing anything, so we obviously need one. But remember that your policy can pretty much make or break your security, so it's really important that you get it right. Now, we are going to continue this discussion and we'll talk more about rules in later videos, but for now, we hope you've enjoyed this video and would like to thank you for watching.